Hi, my name is Sean Yoon and I'm a current junior at LCSJG. This video is a series of introducing how to use the programming language R and also some basics of statistics. In this lecture, we'll be covering how to create vectors, which is a very basic way of storing data in R. So in R, the most basic object, the most basic thing that can store a certain piece of data is called a vector. And here we're going to create vectors and also going to manipulate them, going to call them from, we're also going to pull them from so we'll first begin by creating vectors. As we talked about in the previous lecture, there are different classes of data. It can be numeric, it can be character, it can be factors, or it can also be logical like true or false. But in all of these forms, we use something called the concatenate function, which is a very, it's like a tongue twister. It's called concatenate function. But using this is very simple because we just write it as C and then enter all the values that we want to put into this vector. So if I write this kind of code and run this line, you see here that this set of numbers, 380, 240, so on and so forth, has been stored inside this object called quotes. And you can confirm that this is a numeric vector. And so this thing here, where I've just essentially tied together these numeric objects, is called a vector. We can do the same thing with character vectors, with characters, where I can tie together types of foods. So in R, we normally put letters between the apostrophe. So I write hamburgers, pork belly, steak, kimchi. And when I run this, you also see here that it is CHR, which represents character. And we also have this vector called food, where you have this list of foods inside here. And we can also name the elements of this numeric vector. So what do I mean by this? Let's say that I write this kind of called KGSCN. So here you can write the apostrophe or not, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, I guess it doesn't matter. This. And when you run run this thing called KGSCA, what we get is that as below, we get hamburgers as 380, pork belly as 240, steak as 1,000. So essentially, you are getting this two lines where, like this chart, basically like this chart, where each of these characters are assigned to the number that you've tied them together with this equal sign. So this is how you would name the elements of this vector. But you can also use a different method and perhaps a more clean one. So you see here that we have already assigned codes and foods like this. So if I run this thing called names codes, I have not assigned a name to each one of these. So what I get is nothing, just null. But you remember how in the previous video, we assigned the values like 3 to A and 2 to B and so on and so forth. So we can do the same thing. We can write something like this, where I am just essentially assigning the names of each food to names of the code, the numbers right here. And if I run this line, I get this kind of thing, which is equal to this vector called KGSEA, where I have assigned each of these names, each of these food names to each of the numbers. So this is also something that's possible. And using the same method, we can also recall some of the objects, some of the numbers, and some of the characters that we have stored inside this vector. For example, look at this. If I write KGSEA3, what I get is the third value within KGSEA. But what if I want to get multiple ones? What if I want to get 1, 2, and 3? What I can do is I can write this thing in the middle, which basically means I want the first to the third element within this vector called KGSA. If I run this, I get the first 3 ones. If I do it like this, I get the second to third one. If I do it like this, I get the second to the fourth one within KGSA. But what if I don't want to get this continuous between 2 and 4? What if I want to get only 2 and 4, not 2 and 4? Remember that we used this concatenate function to tie these numbers together? We can do the same thing like this. And we would only get the second and the fourth one within KGSDA. But another way of doing this exactly same thing is that we can call them by names. So you see here that we've assigned a name to each of the elements of the numeric vector. And there's a reason why we did it, because it becomes easier to call each of these numbers, each of these numeric values, like the elements of the numeric vector. So what we can do is that we can set up this. And what we would get is the elements named hamburgers inside KGSEA. And we can do the same thing like as this. We can use the function C again. And we would get what we expected to get. So in today's lecture, we have covered how we can use the function C in order to tie variables, to tie elements together and put it into a vector. We have also learned how we can use different ways in order to access the elements inside a vector, whether it's numeric or whether it's a character or whatnot. Thank you for watching.